Prairie Yard and Garden is a production of the University of Minnesota Morris in cooperation with Pioneer Public Television. Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASIRA. Mark and Margaret Yackel Jolene, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHill.org.
Our family has been part of a county fair for over 50 years. We love to look at the animals, visit the food booths, and especially enter and see all the exhibits. For the past many years, there are always such beautiful dahlias entered at the local fair. I'm Mary Holm, host of Prairie Yard and Garden, and let's go track down the source of those lovely flowers. Dahlias are flowers that have been around for a long, long time. In fact, they were grown by the Aztecs in Mexico, then were taken to Europe by the early Spanish explorers, spread to France, Germany, and England, and finally came back to the United States. Thank goodness they did, because some of the most beautiful dahlias are grown right here in the cut flower garden of Diane and Jerome Winter. Welcome.
Welcome, Mary. Thank
Nice
you.
you could make it.
How did you get started growing flowers?
Well, actually, we were on a Sunday drive, and we were driving through the countryside, and we came upon a home where they were lined with yellow flowers, and it was so gorgeous. And we were just so overcome with it, we stopped in and asked, what are those lovely flowers you have? And they were pleased to tell us they were dahlias. And furthermore, they would give us some of the tubers if in the fall, if we were to come back and get them. And I said, well, that's magnificent on 2 counts. Enjoy them today, we'll enjoy them again. So we went back and got some, and that's how we got started.
So are the dahlias that you grow, are they grown from seed or from roots, or what? How are these grown?
Ours are from tubers.
Yep.
Okay, and how are they different from the ones that are grown from seed?
Well, the tuber is absolutely true. It's almost like being cloned. It's exactly true to the plant that came from. And that's how they're reproduced, whereas the seed might vary a little bit. But these are probably a larger plant, too.
I've seen a lot of the seed-grown varieties, and they do not have the size that yours do. So when do you start your dahlias and your dahlia tubers?
Usually about the 1st of May. And we start them in damp peat moss. And that way, when they start getting these little shoots, you know which ones are viable. And then by the middle of May, about corn planting time for us, that's when you'd put them in the ground.
Where do you start them? In the house or where?
In the house, in the shed, wherever it would not freeze.
Well, I noticed that you have a little greenhouse too. Do you put some in there?
Usually not, because that varies. In the daytime, it can be 110. And then at night, if you don't have the heater on, it might be really cold. So it just isn't quite as predictable.
Then how do you prepare the soil here in your garden before you put them in?
Well, one thing nice with dahlias is since we plant them in the same area every year, when you dig them up in the fall, you've already tilled it for next spring. So just a rough rake, and then we put on our fertilizer, and then put in the bulbs. And I don't even actually do any weeding at that point, because right before they come up, then I'll spray with Roundup, because it won't have touched the dahlia, but it'll clean out everything else.
That was one thing I was going to ask. If you fertilize, when you fertilize, and what you use.
We usually use 5, 10, 10 according to the directions. And then after that, don't use any nitrogen, because then you'll get all foliage and no flowers. But what you want to do is add maybe 2 tablespoons of bone meal in the hole when you bury them. And that gives you enough P and K to carry them through.
Okay, and so those are the ones that really help with the flowering part of it.
Yep.
Okay, how about then during the season? Do you fertilize them at all during the season too?
I don't, because this has been successful. And where we're standing up until about 30 years ago was a feedlot. So there's probably plenty of nutrients here.
Okay, and that was one of the things I was going to ask, if you add any compost to your soil or anything to
Amend it?
Yep.
We did add a little sand down the rows and a little peat moss. And it just gives the soil a more crumbly texture, because those roots have to expand.
And then how often do you water them too?
When you first plant them, you never water them. You wait till they're about a foot high, even if it's dry, because the tuber has enough moisture to carry them through. If they get too much, more than just your regular rain, then they will rot. So you just plant them, forget them until they're about a foot high. And then you can't really water them hardly too much.
Okay.
They love water.
It rained this morning, for instance, and we watered last night. And there's no water standing where the dahlias are. I mean, they suck it up as fast as they can. It's almost like their stems are straws.
Okay.
They're full of water. They really are.
Okay.
Dahlias are 95% water. So when they freeze in the fall, they just collapse.
Really?
They'll go from looking like this in the evening, and the next morning it'll look like black rags.
To keep up with the watering, have you built a special system or anything? Because that'd be a lot of time standing with a hose to keep them that wet.
To tell them about your creative system.
We tried drip hoses, but we have real hard water, and they would only last a year, and they would plug up with rust. Okay. So I buy this PVC 3/4 inch, and it's only like $1 for a 10-foot section. And then I drill maybe a 1/64 inch hole every 6 to 12 inches. And then you can couple them up. Here I have 30-foot lengths. And then I connect the hose on the end so I can water 30 feet at once. And then it might take 5 or 10 minutes to do that row. And I'm usually doing something else. You switch it to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So.
When you plant your dahlias, I should have asked that before, but how far apart do you space them?
Usually about 2 feet.
Okay. Then do you need to pinch the plants at all or pick off the first blooms or anything to get them to branch out?
I don't. Some people do. If you pinch them, they'll stay shorter. But when they grow tall, they still they branch out. And actually, right before freezing, the branches are blooming and they'll actually be collapsing almost for the amount of bloom.
Okay.
What we find too, it depends on what your purpose is. If you want to grow the large dahlias, we don't grow the dinner plate ones anymore. No. But if you want to grow them large, you have to pinch back your plant, or your plant will grow a lot of smaller ones.
Sure.
So that is kind of what your motivation is. Our motivation is merely to use them as cut flowers. So I'm not interested in having the large ones. They're harder to use. And so that's why we don't bother to do that.
And that makes sense, that the fewer blooms that take energy, the bigger the blooms that are left will end up growing, because then they can hog all of the nutrients and all of the water and everything. Yes. So
and the dinner plates too are like sunflowers. They tend to tilt the bloom down because of the weight. Well, then when she uses them in arrangements, you can't get the right angle because it's drooping.
Sure, yeah. Now, with the beautiful blooms that you have, and lots of blooms, do you have to worry about the wind?
Oh yeah, that's our major concern up here is the wind.
Okay.
But we use these cattle panels. They come in 16-foot sections, and I just take a couple of T-posts and prop them up, tie them up with twine, and then we tie the dahlia plants to them. About the time they get about 18 inches high, we start. When you tie them, instead of just tying them one place, because the plant in the wind will work itself off. You tie it 2 sides from an angle. So it blows against the fence, away from the fence it'll tug. And then one way or the other, one of those loops will hold it.
Okay.
It's a little bit like supporting a small tree. You want to do it from different angles and not just one tether, or it won't, it'll snap at some point.
It sounds complicated, but it only takes about a minute to tie each one.
And what do you use to tie then?
Plastic twine.
Okay, you don't have to worry about it cutting the stem or anything?
No, because it's just looped around. It isn't tight or anything.
Okay. Well, and then I noticed that you've got some of the big round bales here too on your farm. Is that too for the wind?
Yep. Emergency feed source, we just line them up here.
Oh, okay.
And then this is kind of the back lot of the farm, you might say. Sort of like, it's an extra piece, let's put something in there.
But in addition to the wind, it also keeps the deer out, because this is quite a wildlife area. And so the deer won't jump over the bales and come on to the garden either, we've discovered. They may if it was out in a field perhaps, but they don't here. And so that allows us to have this sort of mobile fencing. If we change the design of the garden sometime when the bales get moved, then we make alterations and put the bales back in a different way or something.
And then what do you do in the fall?
Well, they'll produce more and more blooms until they freeze. You just wait.
Okay.
And enjoy them. And when you get a killing frost, like I say, the morning after, it'll look like a disaster. And then you wait 2 weeks, and then you cut them off, and then you can start digging them. And when I dig them, the easiest way I found is you put a spade on each side of it about a foot, 8 inches on each side, and then you put a hose, you kind of work that down underneath. And then you pry those 2 spades apart, and the water kind of helps lifts them up. It kind of dissolves the soil around them.
Okay.
If you're trying to really save every bulb. And then you wash them off. And then you, as I say, process them. You cut them into individual tubers with an eye.
Okay.
And that, you might have to ask somebody to show you, or you might see that little green tip, because they've been in the ground now 2 weeks with no top, and they start to resprout.
When you cut them off, do you cut them off right at ground level or a little bit up higher?
Oh, maybe 4 inches up. And then you might label them at that point.
Oh, sure.
And then you cut them up, and you leave them and wash them off good, and cut those stringy tails off. And then let them dry probably 4 or 5 hours at room temperature, out of the sun though.
Okay.
And then you shake them with powdered sulfur in a bag. And if you can't get powdered sulfur, buy lawn sulfur. They're little pellets at your garden supply store, and you can run them through an old coffee grinder to make the powdered. And it's just like shake and bake. You just shake them in there, and then you line them out and leave them another 3 hours.
Why do you put the sulfur on them?
It's a fungicide.
Okay,
And,
so they've got any kind of a disease that helps
Yep,
to...
that would kill it or prevent it from spreading.
Okay.
And then after the 3 hours after you've spouted them with sulfur, then you wrap them in cellophane. And I'm trying to explain this. You lay out cellophane, and then you lay a bulb on, or tuber on there, and as you roll it, once it's covered, then you can lay the next one next to it.
Sure.
And the next one next to that. And you can get a bundle of maybe 30, and then tape it, twist the ends, loop them over, tape it so that they're not losing any moisture. But none of them are touching each other. Because in a bundle you might have, out of 30 you might lose 2, and then they won't infect the others.
Okay.
If you're concerned about that, you can wrap each one individually.
Oh, sure.
It just takes you a whole lot longer time to wrap each one individually. This is sort of to speed up the process. If you have a couple of small plants, you may want to do that just to make sure that you don't run into any problems with them touching. But otherwise, this has worked really well for us.
Okay.
And then you just put that packet in a 40-degree refrigerator. And I always tell people if they have quite a few, get one of those little dorm refrigerators.
Sure.
And then your dahlias don't have to be moved and knocked around during the year when you're getting in and out of your fridge. But for a few, you could easily keep, probably 50 to 100 in half a crisper drawer.
Do you keep all of these in your refrigerator?
We have a special just fridge in the basement.
Oh,
But it's for
okay.
dahlias and gladiola bulbs.
Okay.
This got slightly out of control, but for a friend of ours, she did this with a few plants that she had gotten tubers from us for, and she had followed the directions on how to do it, wrapped them very faithfully, did them with the sulfur, put them in her crisper drawer, and then family members came home over the holidays, and as they were cleaning the fridge from the leftover food, they threw them away thinking they were rotted potatoes. And they wondered why their mother had these in the crisper drawer. Unfortunately, she lost her bulbs because they don't look real good when they're wrapped up. They have kind of a yellowish tinge to them, and they look a little spoiled, but they're fine. So label them well when you put them away.
And maybe even tell the rest of the family what's going on here. Huh?
Right.
So now some people have told me that they will store theirs in peat moss and put them in the basement, but I'm sure you have to keep them where it's really cool.
Yep, and humidity. It might be too humid. It might be, or it might not stay cool enough early spring, and they'll start to grow out. What I always tell people, if you buy them at like a big box store, get them early and then put them in your refrigerator. Because if you wait until you're going to plant them, usually they're growed out in the bag, and they're hard to know, should you break it off before you plant it, or what should you do? Same with glads. If you see them in your big box stores, get them early and put them in the fridge. Because if you wait, they'll have grown out, and some of those won't make it.
Oh, okay. So you mentioned that your first ones came from somebody else, but now you have so many varieties. Where do you get a lot of your bulbs from, or your roots?
We get them from Swan Island Dahlias out of Oregon. That's where the premier place to grow them is. And they have a glossy catalog, and on the internet there's a number of other growers. But I think Swan Island's the only one with the catalog yet.
And then, of course, when other people grow dahlias, we have shared a few of our tubers with them, and then they have shared a few with us. And so you've gotten some of the heirloom ones that way that maybe grandma grew and that kind of thing. And so the sharing of any gardener is always one of the keys, because those are the ones that grow in our area and grow well and easier.
Then I see that some of your varieties have different types of flowers. Is that the case, that there's some that kind of have a special kind of flower as compared to a different kind?
Yeah, there's about 17 classifications of flowers. Some are like a water lily, flat on the bottom with a long stem. Some are like a cactus, they're very spiky. Some are very formal, like you think rounded petals in a very even thing. But if you spray them for insects at all, every one that blooms will be perfect the day it opens.
How long does each flower last?
If it's left on the bush, about probably a week.
Wow.
Now, if you pick it the second day, then another one will take its place within just a day or two. So the more you pick, the more you get.
Okay. And then what do you use your flowers for? I know that you love, this is a cut flower garden. So what do you use all your flowers for?
Well, we share them with friends and neighbors, and sometimes just somebody I see in the paper that maybe had a special occasion and you drop by with some unexpected flowers. We've made many new friends that way. And it's fun because it's not something they're expecting, and it's nothing you have to do. And so it's always wonderful to surprise people with that. And the other thing is that sometimes it's just that you know someone needs flowers for some occasion and maybe can't afford to go out to a nursery and buy them, or to a florist. And so you're happy to contribute what you can. And people get them for churches and birthdays and anniversaries and get well, and just for their own homes or whatever. It's just one of those things when anyone needs a cheery look. It's hard to be unhappy if someone hands you a bouquet of flowers. So that's sort of our motivation in it, is just simply to share them. And there are too many for us to enjoy in our own home. And so obviously the season's short in Minnesota. So the more people who can take them and enjoy them in their homes, the more use we get out of them. So that's the whole purpose of it.
Okay.
And especially older people who used to be able to garden, but are in a condo or something like that, where they can't do it, they always appreciate that. And take an extra tomato.
Well, I have seen your work at the fair, where you have made the most beautiful arrangements.
Oh, thank you,
And
Mary.
at the homemakers banquet and everything too. Would you be willing to show us how to actually make an arrangement using your dahlias and your other cut flowers too?
I'd be happy to, Mary.
I have a question. Why is it important to include native plants in your landscape?
Well, native plants are important in a landscape because they're the epitome of a sustainable garden. They grew here on their own rainfall, in our soils, in our climate, before there were any gardeners, so you didn't need to irrigate, you didn't need any pesticides or any fertilizers. So I usually consider that the number one reason. Number two is that they are part of the web of life, so they're great for pollinators, for songbirds, and other nature in your garden. The third reason is that they celebrate our spirit of place. They really define where we're at. Here at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, we like to showcase plants that are indigenous to the area, that really showcase what we're all about, so that all botanical gardens or gardens don't look the same. If you went to the Coastal Maine Botanical Garden on the coast of Maine, you should see plants that celebrate that spirit of place. And that really creates a beautiful experience.
Ask the Arboretum Experts has been brought to you by the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum in Chanhassen, dedicated to enriching lives through the appreciation and knowledge of plants.
Thank you, Mary, for asking me to show you some of the ways that I arrange flowers. Now, if you were arranging them for some sort of judging process, you might do it differently. I'm mostly talking about the way I arrange for pleasure. Your pleasure, my pleasure, what you think is beautiful or what I think would be enjoyable. One of the things I like to do is an arrangement for a tabletop to keep it low and to put as many flowers as I can into it when they're all blooming. And what I use is an orchid tray with grid work on the top of it, so that I fill it with water and then I just poke my stems down into the grid work. And the grid work is just simple little squares, but it goes into the water. So I don't need a long stem on my flowers. That's what you do to get the arrangement put together. And then if you want to add a candle, you can. If you want to add another little decorative item, it always adds to it too. So that you could just stick your butterfly in there and it would look like she just landed. Another thing you can do is take any small container that you have, and I stuck bells of Ireland and a little celosia in it, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time, and maybe you only have one plant in your garden, but you can still make something. Another thing you can do with this arrangement is go out in the field. We happen to have native grasses. Go out in the native grasses. I pull up some native grasses. I take off a lot of the grassy stems so that I don't get too much of that into the water.
And why?
Because that'll make your water become stale and it'll discolor your water.
Okay.
And so then that can go into your arrangement and you will see just what a difference that makes. It adds just a fullness and a real light airiness to your arrangement.
You bet.
And it doesn't take any time and it certainly is free. And you can take a smaller stem of it by just discarding the bottom pieces, and you can add it into any arrangement and it will just simply enhance it. It just adds an airiness, and the wind today is helping with that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing that you can do too when you're done, which I like to do because I think it adds a little interest. I'm a person of monarchs, so I like to stick a little monarch into my floral arrangement so that people can just enjoy that. And then this particular one I don't have finished, but I used a wet, it's called a wet foam.
Okay, like an oasis.
Yep, an oasis, like a wet foam. Mm-hmm. And then as long as you poke a hole so the water can get into it, you can take anything. You could take these ageratum, again, remove the green so that it doesn't discolor your water, trim it to whatever height you need it for your arrangement, and then you can put them in as a bundle into your arrangement and add that color that needs to be there to finish it off. And you could add more and make it a little bit shorter in the front. You know, there's many ways you can do it with just simple flowers. You don't need to have a lot of expensive things, and you don't have to worry about having an abundance. You can just add a little bit, and that adds a great thing. And again, this has a little cottonwood. Probably stick my little cottonwood in there too. Get my butterfly in there. So we could do all of those things with just naturally occurring.
Things out in the pasture,
Yes.
plus your cut flower garden here too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we could even take, happens to be, you can take Lovelies bleeding is, the natural name for it, but they're all different kinds of it. But you can take this and add this into any taller arrangement as well, and just, it again starts to change the function of it and changes the design. And this is getting to be a rather full vase, but that might be what your pleasure is.
And that would be really pretty, even used for church, for a centerpiece,
Absolutely.
for a gift.
Absolutely.
Anything.
Many good purposes for flowers, and we should always assume that flowers bring friendship and cause a lot of joy for people, so continue to use them.
Do you have a favorite variety of flower or cut flower? Obviously dahlias, it's got a rank at the top, but any others that you really like?
I do like gladiolas, and I really like the coxcomb celosia. I really like that. It holds up so well, and it's extremely sturdy. It can be in an arrangement for 2 weeks. You can change the flowers around it, and it'll stay.
Really?
So it's a really wonderful one to give to people, because when everything else goes away, they can still have this. They can just trim this and put it in a separate little pot. That would be just fine.
Diane, you had said that one of your favorite flowers is the celosia. So now we're going to ask Jerome, which is your favorite?
Well, I haven't decided yet between Spartacus, which is a red, and Magic Moment, but I'm leaning toward Magic Moment.
Okay, why?
First to bloom, it goes right up until frost, and it just blooms profusely and produces a lot of tubers and is a real good keeper. Just all around, the best, easiest to grow of the dahlias.
Okay. Well, I'd like to say thank you to both of you for letting us come out and see your beautiful dahlias and all of your cut flowers and even your formal garden and geraniums. You have the most beautiful plants.
Well, thank you, Mary.
It's our honor that you would even consider us for the show, so we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASIRA. Mark and Margaret Yackel Jolene, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHill.org.